welcome to Cultural Connection. I'm Nancy Commandoris, the Cultural Arts Supervisor for the City of Farmington Hills. And we are really excited today to be in the home and studio of Tom Hale, one of our most wonderful artists and residents of the past. And it's a real privilege to be here, Tom. Thanks for doing the show with us.
Thank you, Nancy.
It's so amazing. As soon as you walk in the door here, it's just filled with incredible artwork, both Tom's private collection and his own works, and they are really stupendous, just incredible. So you work here, Tom, in your home too, is that right?
Yes, I have a studio and then converted a portion of my home to a gallery, which allows me to hang up the paintings, light them properly.
Of course, you're such a well-known automotive artist, and it came originally from Farmington Hills, correct? Or?
I've been a Michigan resident, except when I went to California to go to school. But I started drawing cars when I was 7 years old. And like most young kids, they get asked what they want to do, and most of them don't know what they want to do. In my case, I just always wanted to be a car designer, and I didn't have a second choice. So eventually I went to school in California and got a degree and hired in at General Motors, came back in 1966, hired in at GM, spent 2 years at GM, a year at Chrysler, and 17 at American Motors. And I absolutely loved, I was drawing cars, future cars. That's what I would do all day. I would sit at a drawing board and I would just draw future cars. And I loved it. And of course, work on clay cars and pursue design projects for the studio, but primarily you were just designing future cars. I just wasn't too crazy about corporate life. And I know that's a problem with a lot of people. It was a big problem with me. And so I just felt like I wasn't being used creatively. I had a lot of energy. And so I started painting on my lunch hours. And I found it kind of amusing that I was painting old broken down barns and houses and landscapes on my lunch hour, and then I would design future cars after that. So the contrast was pretty dramatic. And I'd come home and paint, and I'd paint on weekends, and had no idea that I was building a second career. It wasn't intended. It was just to kind of relieve the frustration of being creative and not feeling like you're being used to the extent that you wanted to. So eventually started selling paintings. People wanted to buy them and started going to some art shows. And in 1985, my late wife and I were having such a great time with the art, making a little bit of money, and decided that we could walk away from the career. And so I had 20 years in at the time, 6 weeks paid vacation, all the benefits, and just walked away.
Wow.
And never looked back.
Never looked back.
So this is my 27th year full-time artist.
Well, Tom, let's back up a little bit and talk about your education, where you went to school for your artwork.
I started, got out of the Navy and went to Michigan State for a year. And at that time, back in the 60s, you could go to the auto companies and they would advise you and let you see the design studio. And so I had an opportunity to go to GM. And the fellow that was interviewing me, I brought some sketches along that I thought were, the minute they'd see them, they would hire me, you know. So anyhow, he took me into the design development studio, and I was just stunned. I had never seen anything like this. Didn't even dream that there were people doing work to that level. Because back then you didn't have the awareness of it. The magazines barely covered styling, and so it was a real shock. So he said, well, let me see your sketches. And I said, no, I don't want to show them to you. He said, come on, let me see them. Yeah. So I showed him. He said, well, if you want to be a car designer, he says, you've got to go out to Art Center in California. I said, because that's where we hire from. And so I said, well, I don't have the money to go there. And he said, well, then you need to find another career. I mean, he was really blunt, but the bluntness was very effective because there was no gray area. I mean, if I wanted to be a car designer, that's where I had to go.
This one school.
Yep.
Wow.
And so I worked a couple jobs and went out to California and had enough money to start Art Center. And I think in my second semester I got a scholarship from Ford, and that took care of tuition for the 9 semesters I was there. At that time, the auto companies came out to the school and they looked at your portfolio, and if they liked it, they offered you a job. So I had a job offer from GM, Chrysler, and Ford.
Wow, that was...
And GM was the place to work at that time. They're just, in the whole world, from a design standpoint, in the 60s, GM was the place to work. So I came back and hired in at GM and spent 2 years there, a year at Chrysler and 17 at American Motors. Art Center was a great school, the Art Center School, which is now in Pasadena. It's called the Art Center College of Design. And they are still specializing in transportation design, but so is CCS in Detroit, and that school has really come up to where it's one of the really great schools in the country. A lot of people are surprised that the school exists downtown Detroit, right in their backyard. Mm-hmm. And it's a great school.
It is one of the predominant schools
absolutely.
For design, and you said a lot of the teachers from CCS or at CCS have come from the Art Center.
Yeah, and I think they instituted some of the teaching methods that probably made Art Center as successful as it was at the time. But it's a great school, and a lot of designers are hired from CCS.
So you left the corporate world and started on doing your own paintings and so on. Did you ever do the art circus where you would go around to art fairs and that sort of thing?
I did Ann Arbor for 19 years. At that time, the major shows were mostly in Florida. Disney had a great show, probably the best show in the country. Coconut Grove and Winter Park. So over the years, I did over 400 shows. And so I got pretty skilled at putting my display up and taking it down in the rain, in the storms, whatever.
What a life that is, I know.
Been through all of that. But it is fascinating. The beauty of it is that you're dealing one-on-one with people. You go to a show, you go to all the work at 6 o'clock in the morning, hang up your paintings, and somebody comes in, and if they like the paintings, you talk about it, and if they want to buy it, they write a check or whatever. And it's so basic, and the beauty of it is the simplicity and the basicness of it. There's nothing complicated about you and the client and your artwork. Mm-hmm. And I've always liked that aspect of shows. But they're difficult to do, involve a lot of travel. You know, for an artist, I've always figured there's 3 ways that I can market my work. I can do it myself at shows, which is what I do. I can do the gallery thing, and I can have a representative. And I've done all of it. I've been in 10 different galleries over the years. Gallery is good when it sells your work, when it keeps showing and selling your work and not putting it in the back room. The downside of galleries is the commission oftentimes is 40-50%, and that's, for a lot of artists, that's a lot of money. So I've been happy selling it myself. I really like meeting the people that buy my work. Galleries sometimes don't want you to know who's buying your work because they don't want you and the buyer to get together. Sure. So I've enjoyed selling and meeting the people, and a lot of them become friends. What has really been fascinating to me is with the automobile art. I know a lot of car collectors, and they're obviously wealthy people if they own collections of expensive cars. It's kind of like they also want to have their token artist friend. So I've noticed over the years that a lot of these wealthy people, whom I would never have an occasion to meet or know, they invite me to their homes, and I'm like their buddy now.
Celebrity, really?
Yeah. But if I was working in their company, they probably wouldn't give me a time of day. So it's been fascinating. That aspect is something I never anticipated, but it's been the people I've met have been really exciting.
You've met some people in other countries, obviously. You travel to other countries? for your
Well, I
clients?
had a client in Japan that 10:30 at night at a show in Indiana bought a painting from me, an expensive painting, and then wrote me a letter a few months later, and he wanted to have first choice of everything I did on Jaguar, BMW, Mercedes. He had a collection of 150 cars
Oh my goodness, 150.
of just those cars. So he wanted first choice of everything I would do on that. So after I do like 3 paintings, I would send images of them to him with the prices, and he would write back and he'd say, well, I like them and I'd like to buy them at this price. And I would write back and say, no, I can't sell them at that price, but I can sell them at this price. So then he would say, okay, and he'd wire transfer the money and I'd ship the paintings. So I sold him maybe about 18 paintings over a period of time. And he was going to build a museum for his cars and a museum for my art.
Nice.
So two separate museums. Then he invited me to Japan for 10 days, paid all the expenses, and toured us all over Japan. Fran and I went to Japan, and we toured all over in a Mercedes limousine and a classic Bentley one day. And he wanted to show us everything that Japan was about. We went to Nagoya City is where we flew in. But then the economy in Japan fell apart shortly after that. And that just kind of put a stop to the whole project. But yeah, that was just all, the connection was just, he liked my artwork. And it developed into this friendship. I mean, we just got to really enjoy these people. And it was great.
So you have art all over the world in collections, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've sold in maybe 12 or 13 countries.
Well, how do you, now he had his own personal collection. How do you react when someone says, will you paint my car? I want a painting of my car. That's not what it's about, really, is it?
No, I'm not trying to make pictures of cars. I'm trying to do art, and the subject happens to be a car. So a lot of people walk into my display and they'll say, oh, can you do a painting of my '54 Chevy or whatever? I don't really want to do pictures of people's cars, particularly. I had one commission one time from somebody really well known in the area, went out to their estate, and she wanted me to paint her Jaguar. So she told me what she wanted me to do, and we had agreed on a price, and then when I got out to the house, her and her husband wanted more. Well, I hadn't met her husband. Suddenly, her husband comes into the bar and she says, well, Jim, Tom has to tell you something. He wants to charge double the price. And I said, well, because I can't do what you want me to do for the price. So they agreed to it. And then we walked around the house, and he suddenly said, you see that birdhouse up there? He said, Mary's dad built that birdhouse, and can you put that into painting?
Oh, no.
And I thought, well, I said, yeah, I can put, you see those evergreens on the back of the property? And I said, Jim, I said, this is a painting about the Jaguar. I said, I can't put all this other stuff. Okay, yeah, you're right, Tom, you're right. You do it your way.
Well, at least he listened to you.
But that's a lot of people, they want their house or they want themselves or something like that. It isn't enough art for me, and it's always difficult. I never have as much fun doing that painting as I do when I paint for myself.
Yes.
So I try to gracefully get out of it either by I don't have the time for the next year or two, or the price is going to be this, and sometimes that'll take their breath away, and they'll say, well, I'll think about that. So gracefully I try to get out of it.
Well, how do you find the subjects for your paintings? And I mean, you don't always have a Mercedes-Benz in your driveway to look at. So where do you go to find the cars, and how do you get involved with finding exactly what you want to paint?
Well, I go to a lot of the high-end car shows because I really like to paint the classics in the 50s and that. And like the Meadowbrook Concours that was out in Rochester, I've been in that every year since 1982. Now it's at St. John out in Plymouth, and this is going to be the second year it's at St. John. So you go to places like that, you see some of the great cars in the world. I go to Pebble Beach every year, Monterey, and that's the greatest car show in the world. The cars come from all over the world, and they are they're multi-million-dollar cars. There'll be 200 cars on the field like you've never seen in your life. Just amazing. So I go to those places. I shoot a whole lot of pictures of cars. Film was cheap when I used to use film. Digital is real simple today. And I shoot hundreds of pictures of cars. And if I have an idea for a painting of a car, I'll research some of those pictures. I don't paint from photographs. It's just not a good thing to paint from photographs, and I don't do that. But I need the photographs for all the information because I can't possibly remember the details.
Sure.
And a lot of these classics have elaborate details that it's just impossible to remember. And the people that are buying my paintings and that look at my paintings, they know these cars. You know, an old classic Rolls Royce that has rivets on the hood, they know exactly how many rivets are on the hood. Those are the people I have to deal with, and you know, I've had them come up and say, well, you didn't put the right number of grill bars in there, you know. So
They better be accurate.
yeah, so the photographs are great that way. And then I have a lot of reference books, and I'm a believer that I shouldn't paint something unless I really know it, because if I don't know it, it shows. I've given some critiques at arts clubs and that, and sometimes people will paint a barn or they'll paint a tree, and I'll say, well, did you really look at the barn or did you really look at the tree? Because trees don't grow that way, you know, or they don't build barns that way. So I'm a believer that you really need to kind of know the subject if you're going to do a piece of art on it.
I love how you sometimes take a certain part of the car and focus on just the one detail or the parts of, you know, one certain angle of it or whatever. I think that's so nice. And the lovely way you use the chrome look and how everything reflects in it is just gorgeous. The colors are so vibrant.
Chrome has been a little issue with me because a lot of people are fascinated with the way I paint chrome. I don't, you know, if I go to a museum and I look at some great old portraits of people, and you look at the skin and you think, wow, that's amazing how realistic. And it's all done with paint. It just means that the artist really understood how to depict skin in a painting. I understand how to depict reflections in chrome, and so it's not a big deal. I have people think I buy tubes of paint that say use this for chrome. I mean, they have asked me if I buy a tube of paint for chrome.
Really?
And I mean, chrome is just a mirror, you know?
I was going to say there's no chrome paint.
Yeah, there are people that are fascinated with that. I had one guy that bought a painting and it had glass on it. It was a big painting. He came into my studio and it was a fairly expensive, large painting. And so I'd cleaned the glass, wiped it off, and was getting ready to package it. And he's looking at it, he says, I just don't understand how you do these reflections and how you do this chrome. And I said, well, it's just all an illusion, you know, it's just done with flat paint. He says, he's not listening. He says, oh, he says, it's the glass.
Oh, it's the glass that's shining.
No, it's not the glass. I don't know, you know, it amazes me that people are just fascinated with that, but they are.
Well, I guess it's because it looks so real to them and they can't figure out why.
And it's just an illusion. And in terms of portions of cars, when I was a designer, there were times I would have to just design a taillight or a grille texture or something like that. And I understand that there are areas of cars that an artist worked on, that they just isolated that little area and that was what they worked on. Somebody else worked on other parts of the car. So I know that on these old cars there's a lot of beautiful areas, but when you walk up to a Duesenberg, a classic Duesenberg, the car is so overwhelming that you just stand there in awe of this thing. And yet I know that there's all these wonderful areas on that car. And there's great potential compositions with parts of a fender or parts of a headlight or something. And so that's what I see when I see the cars. I mean, I still see the whole car, but I also see all these wonderful areas on the car.
That's what I think, getting back to what you were saying, you don't paint a car. You're seeing it as a subject for art.
Yeah.
As opposed to what its function is.
I mean, sheet metal and chrome is a wonderful. Well, I started incorporating some floral images in my cars. And I didn't want them to be super realistic. I just wanted the organic quality of flowers. I wanted the color. And what it did is it gave me an opportunity to do something different with the car, to reflect shapes and colors on top of a hood that you would normally never see. So I would do a large floral image behind the classic car and reflect it down onto the hood. It would give me a chance to do unusual colors on the hood, unusual shapes, without having to tell somebody, well, why'd you do that? What's that? Well, there's this image in the background that reflects down. And so the flower images have really been kind of fascinating. Over the years, a lot of husbands would love my paintings and they'd want to buy one, and women say, I'm not going to hang a car painting in the living room. So I've had to deal with that for years.
Sure, sure.
The floral images have changed that. And now a lot of women that normally would not like a car piece, they see the color, they see the shapes, they don't see the car so much, and now they like the painting.
And just the composition of it and everything, you know.
Which is what I want them to see.
Striking.
I want them to see all that.
Sure.
I don't particularly want them to see the car as a car.
Right. Well, that's...
If that makes any sense.
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. You've got some real fans, I know, and they're starting to use your artwork in other ways. Can you talk about how it's being used for certain things like...
Well, two things in the past couple of years have developed that were kind of a first experience for me. One is we've met this couple out in Napa Valley that had seen my work in a magazine. We met them and had dinner with them out in Napa, and they wanted to use my artwork for a wine label that they were developing, a winery. And so this has been about 3 years, and the wine is a Cabernet is just about finished. So I'm going to have a wine label on a very expensive bottle of wine, signed and numbered labels.
Signed and numbered labels?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's developing. And then the other thing is that another couple that are employees of one of the country's great classic car companies are getting married in New Jersey in May, and they're using one of my paintings of a Duesenberg with an iris as their wedding invitation for 200 people. And they also have put it on, made a postage stamp with the image. So we're going to go to the wedding. They would like us to be at the wedding and bring the original painting.
Oh, that must be kind of fun to see.
So yeah, that's a first wedding invitation. It's good news.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Talk a little bit, we were talking earlier about the business of the arts and what an important element that is to an artist's success.
Over the years, I've come to know a lot of artists of all different styles of art and doing all these shows, and a lot of them have become friends. And it's amazing to me how many, including myself, knew so little about business. I mean, all of a sudden, I have to write a proposal, maybe to a company on an art project, or I have to write a letter to a CEO of a company. And then I sit down and write, and I think, do I sound stupid in this? Do I sound uneducated or what? I mean, that's a part of business I never anticipated, and I didn't do great in school. And so when I do these proposals and write these letters, I'm a little nervous about it because I don't, I want to look professional.
Sure.
The business end of art is a surprise. I never anticipated how much business, communications with people on ideas. I mean, I think all artists get people that approach them with all kinds of ideas, and you need to be able to respond to those. You need to be able to think it out, see if it's something you can do and if it's going to work for them. And so I think people think that I just sit down at a dining room table and clear off whatever and start painting. And there's so much more to being an artist than that. So when I talk to young people at shows and that, I try to encourage them to get as much education as they can, as much a sense of business as they can. Pricing paintings, having to handle money, and charges. I don't take charges. I used to, but there's a lot of paperwork. There's all your tax stuff you got to do. There's a whole aspect of it that takes a lot of time, in addition to just doing paintings. And if you don't attend to it, it causes you a lot of trouble.
Sure, and even networking. I'm sure, like you said, people
Today,
and you get to meet people, and
yeah,
and even things like the computer and getting out there as far as that goes with email, and all of that is so important, and I think a lot of artists don't understand it.
Well, most of my communications today is by email because it's so quick and so efficient. And my computer skills are really minimal. I struggle with that, but a lot of the artists are very good with the computer and sending out images and all that stuff. But I'm kind of slow on that end of things. I don't use anything to do with the computer with my paintings. They're just pure and simple. Nothing but paint, brush, and canvas. Mm-hmm. And no trick stuff. I've never been a fan. When I worked in the car business as a stylist, I was able to see a whole range of techniques. I mean, we had all the materials, we had the time, and they encouraged us to just explore whatever.
That's great.
And so I've seen virtually all the techniques. And when I judge shows and give critiques at arts clubs, I'm really kind of anti-technique, anti-gimmick, because I want to see the purity of art. I don't want to see a lot of trick stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's just the way I've kind of been conditioned.
Well, talk a little bit about jurying a show. What is that like? I know you do that once in a while.
I've done it quite a bit. And I enjoy it because it forces me to think beyond the routine I've gotten into with my thinking. I mean, suddenly I have to look at a range of work, and I have to really look at it, in all fairness, each piece I have to look at, kind of equally. And even pieces I don't particularly like, I have to look at them and I have to think about it. So I like that aspect of jurying. The hardest jury I've ever done was a children's competition in Virginia Beach one time. And it's one thing to jury an adult out of a show. But here you've got maybe a 6-year-old kid that thinks this piece of artwork is the greatest thing in the world. What are you going to say to him, or her? What are you going to say? I mean, you don't want to hurt their feelings. And so jurying children's art is really tough. And in this particular show, I mean, they gave some pretty decent prize money to kids, and you had to jury some pieces out of the show. So that was tough. But I like the experience of jurying. It just opens the world up a little bit for me, because we all get so confined in what we're doing. And every year I jury the State Street show at Ann Arbor, and that's really tough.
Oh, you do? I bet you that is.
Because I know a lot of the artists, and I have to kind of be as objective as I can. But I love the experience.
And of course, that's one of the best shows in the country, and
yeah.
I'm sure there's so many artists that come back every year, but yet you want to get new ones in, and that's tough, isn't it? That
and
balance.
And some artists, they get really comfortable. They got something that's selling, and they get comfortable, and they just simply keep repeating it, and they're not developing. And you see that. I've seen that over the years with some artists. And that just kind of, all of a sudden, one day it's going to be over for them. I mean, I'll go to a show and I'll hang up all my paintings in the booth, and some of them are brand new, and people that follow my work will come in and say, wow, I really like that, or whatever. What do you got on the drawing board? I mean, I'm amazed that they want to know what I'm doing next. And so that's an important aspect of being an artist.
Well, it sure is, because you don't want them to feel that they have one of your pieces and they're set. That's all they need is one Tom Hale piece, but it's evolving all the time. So. And
they do want that evolvement. And so when you see an artist that is just kind of stuck on something that's selling, or it really can be the end of the road in a sense.
Yeah, unless they learn it. And of course, when you jury that, you see all new styles, and that keeps you vibrant, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, what would you say to someone who wants to be an artist these days? I mean, they always, like you mentioned earlier too, that someone will always say, oh, you can't make a living as an artist. But you're making a great living as an artist and loving it, which is most important.
I'm making an okay living as an artist. I don't know, great.
Well,
no, but
you're very successful, really, and you're doing what you love. Yeah. And I think that's the best.
And I mean, that's kind of the message that I would give somebody that wants to be an artist, is that if you want to be an artist, just do what you absolutely believe in, and don't worry so much about what everybody else is doing. I don't like being influenced by a lot of other things that people are doing, because I want my work to be unique. I want to stand totally on its own. I want it to be me. So I encourage young people to do what they really believe in. Others are going to try to tell them what to do, and I think they need to take that lightly. But if you want to be an artist, you really got to work at it. I mean, you got to do it every day. You can't just do it on Sunday, you know. I'm a believer that you've got to do, you got to draw, you got to paint, you got to sculpt, whatever it's going to be. You got to do it every day. You got to do it at least a couple hours or an hour every day. But you can't just be casual about it and expect you're going to earn a living doing it. I mean, it consumes an awful lot of my life. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I work at it constantly. And it's not an 8-hour job, you know. I don't have holidays. Those are work days. I mean, there's 365 days a year are work days. But I don't think it's work, because I actually love painting today more than I ever have. I just love the process of mixing color and putting it on a canvas and making something happen. I just love it.
Oh, your work is just absolutely gorgeous. It really is beautiful. I just love coming into your house and seeing so much of it on your walls, and you know, of course, I see it all over the place too. You know, I saw it up at Charlevoix this summer, and you know, it's everywhere.
When you've been doing it for this long, you know, I've been commissioned to do 52 posters so far, and those end up going all over the world. You know, I go to an event like Pebble Beach, for example, and if I do a poster for Pebble Beach, I mean, it goes everywhere. They sell the posters for, you know, fundraiser for the event. I'm doing the St. John poster for this year, which is out in Plymouth. It's the former Meadowbrook Concours, which is one of the greatest car shows in the country. It's an amazing show. Again, multi-million-dollar cars and cars all the 50s that a lot of people remember. And so I do those kinds of event posters, which are kind of fun. I mean, they're commissions, but in most cases they're on my terms. They let me they like the way I paint, so they let me do a painting for it. And then the other one I just finished is one for Eyes on Design over in Grosse Pointe, which is an annual show. And again, a great car show right in our backyard that so few people know about. It's at the Etzel Ford Estate, which is amazing, right on Lake St. Clair. And I would encourage anybody, if they've never been to that show, to go see it. It's a wonderful show. So those are things that consume a lot of my time. I'm doing about 10 or 12 shows a year right now. And that too takes time, you know, along with being an artist. I mean, you travel, you set up, you do the show, and pack them all up and take them home.
And they're large, so.
And they're getting heavy.
They're getting heavy. Wow.
Yeah. You know, interestingly, and this has fascinated me, I do more business outside of Michigan than I do in Michigan, by far.
Wow. Oh, why? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's, you know, on the surface you would think that people that work in the car business like cars and everything, but it's their job in a lot of cases, and so there's some cynicism about a car. And so they don't want to be reminded of cars maybe when they go home or something in this area. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but the reality is I've done more business outside of Michigan.
But I have to ask you this one question. Is there one car that you've really wanted to paint so far and you haven't done it yet? Or do you have a favorite car?
My favorite cars are Duesenbergs primarily. I really like the classics, primarily out of the 30s, because they were, the people that built those cars, designed those cars and everything, I mean, they were just obsessed with these things, you know, they just loved them, and you can see a lot of that feeling in those cars, and they're loaded with amazing details and workmanship, and so those are some of my favorites. Very few people know what a Duesenberg is, and very few people have ever seen one. A lot of people think it's a German car. It's an American car. But there was only like 470 of them ever built.
Really?
And
wow.
The reason so few people know about them is that in 1929, when the Model J Duesenberg came out, you could buy 40 brand new Chevrolets or 40 brand new Fords for the price of that Duesenberg.
Oh my
So
gosh.
today, you know, you take a Cadillac, it's not 40 times the price of a Chevrolet. But back then, that's how far out of reach the Duesenberg was. So celebrities, actors, and CEOs and everything, those are the people that bought those cars. And everyone is a little bit different. Each one is a little bit different because you bought the chassis, bumpers, instrument panel, and then you send it off to a coach builder and they put on a body as per your specifications.
Wow.
And you could, if you wanted vanities in the back, they would build that, whatever you wanted, as long as you spent the money. And that's why these Duesenbergs today, I mean, they're $1 million cars.
I would imagine they're worth a fortune.
Yeah, they are. They're very collectible, but they're some of my favorites. And I like cars of the 50s. There's just, you look at the colors of cars in the 50s, you look at the amount of chrome. It was like, it's just wide open, you know? I mean, it was like, you could do anything. When I look at a Pontiac, for example, out of the 50s, and I used to go in the showroom and look at those, and they were just amazing. They were covered with chrome, and they had all these wonderful details, and a little bit of space age stuff on some of these cars. And today, you know, it's different today. It's a lot different today. There isn't that freedom that there used to be with cars.
I know, just even, you know, when you order a car these days, the choices are so few, even just for colors. You know, I can remember when you'd see a whole book of colors.
Oh, and beautiful.
My dad was involved in that. You know, you'd see all of that, and then nowadays it's, you know, it's not as interesting.
It's different today. And I think it was a mistake to get away from, you know, when new cars came out, it was almost like Christmas time for people that liked cars. I mean, dealers would fog over their windows and they'd have an unveiling. And, you know, today when you go to buy a car, you don't know what year you're even buying sometimes. You know, they just merge into the next model year and they don't make a big deal of it. And that used to be an exciting thing. Those new car unveilings used to be really exciting.
There's such a romance about these old cars. When you see them on the street, everybody's kind of...
They stand out, don't
they?
they?
Stand out, and they're just so gorgeous. Yeah, just beautiful. I can see why you've fallen in love with them and painting them.
I kind of like cars, yeah.
Well, again, thanks for inviting us in today. We've taken time away from your busy schedule, too. But it's been a delight to just even walk around your house and see all the artwork. And your personal collection of other artists, too, is quite amazing. So thanks so much. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable.
We're proud to have you as a past artist in residence in the Farmington area. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
And,
Thank you, Nancy.
and thanks to all of you for joining us today on Cultural Connection.